All right. Well, good morning, Three Creeks. My name is Joel, and Morgan and I, my wife, got to take a vacation last week, and we missed you all, and we are back rested and ready to go and jump into a brand new series. And before I jump in, I just want to echo for a second what Morgan just shared a few minutes ago, because if you're not here at church right now and you're listening to this podcast, you might even wonder what I'm talking about. But man, I just got to say, as a husband and as the pastor of this church, that I'm so proud of Amy and Kenzie and Brittany and also Morgan for working in this ministry. It's just one way that my wife is giving her life away to others. And if you want to jump in, our church is just all in on My Village Ministries. And if you are wanting to know more about that, or like Morgan shared earlier, if you want to hear some stories about the ways that this ministry is impacting people, then I encourage everybody to sign up for that meeting and just make it a whole Sunday morning thing. Come to the 9 o'clock meeting and then come to church, or come to church and then stay for the meeting. Take advantage of Three Creeks Kids. Put your kids in there twice. Let them have fun 2 times. And just make it a Sunday morning where you really get a real taste of what God is doing through that ministry. It is pretty awesome. Okay, brand new series. We're doing it all the way up until Easter, and we're doing it on purpose that way. And I want to start off the whole series by just asking you a question. What's everybody talking about these days? You know, if you went out to dinner tonight with a group of friends, what would you guys inevitably bring up as a topic of conversation? Perhaps what's going on the other side of the world, maybe the release of the Epstein files, maybe the 0-0 draw last night between the Columbus Crew and their formidable opponent, maybe AI. I bet you that comes up. The robots that are going to do our dishes, I bet you that comes up. Maybe Love is Blind and the season finale. I hope that isn't it, but it could be. It's been going around, and I have no comments on any of those topics. But here's why I bring that up, is that if a group of people living anywhere near Jerusalem 1,990 years ago, in March of 36 AD, if a group of guys or a group of gals went out to dinner, what topic do you think would come up? Let me tell you what would come up. This man from Nazareth named Jesus Christ. That is what everyone was talking about, because for a while rumors have been circulating and he's been nicknamed kind of the magic man from Nazareth, but the question has come up, is he God? Is he the Messiah? Is he the one that all of our ancestors have told us about, the one that has been prophesied about? Is he the one that we have been waiting for? And there's a specific reason as to why the person of Jesus is being talked about everywhere. Because, man, when you think about Easter, if you've spent a lot of time around church, you know that you can kind of draw Easter out to something that we call Holy Week or Passion Week. And the Sunday before Easter is called what? It's called Palm Sunday. And if you've spent some time around church, you know that Jesus rides into Jerusalem on a donkey, and the countdown is on. At that point, Jesus has like 120 hours to live. And we've spent time perhaps over the past couple of years talking about this story, but I want to ask you the question, do you know why there was a crowd waiting for Jesus when he arrived on that donkey? It wasn't that he was riding a donkey where everybody ran out of their houses and goes, a guy on a donkey? No, that wasn't it. Why was there a parade waiting for Jesus? Why had the palm branches already been cut? Do you know the answer to this? Do you know what happened just a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks before Palm Sunday, that set the tone, that was the catalyst for this cultural frenzy where everybody was talking about Jesus of Nazareth? Here's why everybody was talking about him. Because another man named Lazarus, who lived in Bethany, about maybe 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles outside of Jerusalem, who was friends with Jesus, but who also had a lot of other friends, had sisters, had neighbors. He got sick and he died. And he died. He was in a grave for 4 days dead. There was a belief at the time that a person's soul or spirit would kind of remain with the body potentially for about 3 days. But after 3 days, it was like, this is done. I mean, there was a funeral, there was a burial. He was dead. His body stunk. That's how dead he was. And the rumors are circulating that Lazarus isn't dead anymore, and that Jesus of Nazareth came and raised Lazarus from the dead. And his friends and his neighbors and his daughters told everybody that Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. See, Jesus had been doing miracles for about 3 years at this point. And so this wasn't brand new. It wasn't the first time people heard about Jesus. But up until this point, Jesus was trying to keep it down. He was healing people and saying, don't tell anybody yet, because the time hasn't come for everybody to know what I'm about to do. But when Jesus heals Lazarus, when he raises Lazarus from the dead, he's essentially starting the process that will culminate in him dying on the cross for the world. I mean, this is the catalyst moment. Everybody's wondering, is Jesus God? Is he Messiah? Is he who he says? Is he who we think that he is? And Jesus dodges the question for a while. The reason that he keeps dodging the question is because he knows that as soon as he starts answering the question, that the Pharisees are going to essentially immediately plot to kill him. Because the Pharisees at the time are the religious, powerful, political, rich people who kind of run the country. And so if Jesus says, I am the Messiah, I am God, if people start saying that, well, as Jesus goes up, their power goes down. As Jesus' influence goes up, their influence goes down. And so they're going to snuff him out as soon as possible if he starts saying, yeah, I am who you think that I am. And Jesus knows this. So he spends 30 years relatively quietly, and then he starts doing miracles, but he dodges the questions and he downplays some of the momentum. But after 3 years of what we'll call ramping up, Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, and there's no more hiding, and there's no turning back from this. Lazarus, he was a well-known person. People knew about him. People knew that he had died. People knew that there was a funeral. It says that people traveled from Jerusalem to his house to be a part of the burial process. And now Lazarus is having dinner parties with all the people that were at his funeral. It's unbelievable. And so there's no putting this toothpaste back in the tube, if you know what I mean. Everyone was talking about Jesus from Nazareth. So Jesus comes in to Jerusalem on that Palm Sunday. Everybody's waving the palm branches. Everybody's singing the songs. Everybody's excited. There's essentially a parade that welcomes him to town. He's riding on the donkey. And the reason why people came out to see him was not because he was riding a donkey, but because he had raised somebody from the dead. It's what set the emotional tone of Holy Week. So here's that story. This is in John chapter 11. And it's a little bit longer of a story than we normally read in church on a Sunday morning, but I think it's just such an amazing story. I wanted to take our time and just go through it. I'll add some commentary as we go, but I wanted you to catch this moment because this is what sets the emotional tone for Palm Sunday. Here's the story that's recorded in John 11. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters, Mary and Martha, sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. Jesus loves Lazarus. They've spent some time together. They're friends. And they had to send word to Jesus. Why? Why wasn't Jesus there? Because Jesus had gone out of that area because his life was being threatened by the Pharisees. If you look back into John chapter 10, you see that the Pharisees are beginning to get a little frustrated with the influence that Jesus is starting to garner. And so they threatened to kill him, and so Jesus withdraws. It says that he went across the Jordan, and so that's why they had to send a message to Jesus. Your friend Lazarus is sick. When he heard this, Jesus said, "The sickness will not end in death. No, it's for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, "Let's go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," the disciples said, "a short while ago, the Jews, the Pharisees there, tried to stone you, and yet you are going to go back? You're going to go right back into the teeth?" Right before this, in John 10, we read a story about the Pharisees, the money-hungry, power-hungry Pharisees picking up stones because Jesus has begun to simply hint that he might really be God. So the disciples are afraid for Jesus. They're afraid for themselves, but they say, "Fine, we're going with you." And they go back. Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light." And after he said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going to go there to wake him up." His disciples said, "Well, Lord, if he sleeps, he'll just get better." And Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep, and so he had to tell them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I'm glad I wasn't there, so that you may believe. Let us go to him." 2 quick observations so far that I'd like to flag because we're going to come back to them here in a few minutes. 2 reasons that Jesus says Lazarus is sick. First, Jesus says that Lazarus is sick for the glory of God. I find that interesting. And then secondly, he says Lazarus is dead, and he says, "Disciples, I'm glad that I wasn't there to heal him. For your sake, I'm glad that I wasn't there to heal him." We'll come back to that in a second, but I find it interesting that this story so far, which according to Lazarus and Mary and Martha and the disciples would just be a tragic story, Jesus is saying, "Oh, no, I'm making something good here. This is all for your good. It's for God's glory. It's for your sake that this is happening." Here's the longest part of the story here. It says, on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard, try to pay attention to the difference between Martha and Mary and their interactions with Jesus. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come into the world." After she said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and is asking for you." And when Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to meet him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house comforting her noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to go to the tomb to mourn there. And when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Same words as Martha. When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. And Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. the way that it describes Jesus twice there, that he was deeply moved, in the original language that this is written, that's a word that's pronounced embrymaomai, which means to be very angry with, or to even snort with anger. And so, yes, you could say that he was deeply moved, but this was not a deeply moved that he was sad and crying, but he was deeply moved to the point of righteous anger. He's angry because these people, even some of his closest friends, they just want Jesus for what he can do for them. He hasn't broken through yet in communicating what he wants for them. They just see him as a genie in a bottle that can grant their wishes, and he's deeply moved by this attitude. And I wonder if you even notice the difference between Martha and Mary. Martha comes to Jesus and she says, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. But even so, I trust you. I believe that you are God. I believe that you can call on your Father to do whatever you want him to do. I believe that you are the Messiah. And I believe that there will be a resurrection on the last day. You see this like deep, deep faith in Martha in her interaction with Jesus, even in this moment of incredible anguish for her. And then Mary, a little different. She comes, same opening line. Jesus, if you had been here, our brother wouldn't have died. But that's it. Nothing recorded about her faith. Nothing recorded about her trust in Jesus. It implies that Jesus had messed up. And Mary's saying, if only I had been in charge, and if I had been able to kind of make you do what I wanted you to do, this wouldn't have had to happen, as if she had a better plan. And I think it's important as you read this story I think it's important for us to ask ourselves a question this morning. When something doesn't go how we want it to go in our lives, do we respond more like Martha or more like Mary? Do we respond more like Martha or more like Mary? Because we talk about this all the time. While we are here on this earth, traveling through what we sometimes call the murky middle, this gap between what we hope for and our reality. We're all experiencing this. We're all experiencing sadness and disappointment and things not going our way. When that happens, not if it happens, when that happens, are we inclined to trust God in it or blame God for it? Are we inclined to have it draw us nearer to the Lord and trust him because he's going to do something through it? Or does it make us bitter and angry and jaded towards God because if we had it our way, we'd have done it differently? We see just the two people just so, their responses to what Jesus is doing is so different. Because the truth is Jesus could have been there earlier. Jesus could have never withdrawn to the other side of the Jordan. He could have stayed there the whole time. He could have set up an army of angels around the house of Lazarus where the Pharisees couldn't get him. Could have done that. He could have healed Lazarus from the other side of the Jordan. He has healed people from a distance before. He could have rushed sooner. He could have risen him from the dead right away. I mean, he could have done it a lot of different ways. But the truth is that Jesus allowed this to happen. He allowed Lazarus to be dead for 4 days. He allowed there to be a burial and a funeral and for people to weep for 4 days. He wept himself. Why does he allow it? Well, we already covered two of them. One, this was going to be for the glory of God. Two, this was going to be for the sake of the disciples. And three, verse 39, here's the end of this story in John 11. He says, take away the stone. But Lord, Martha said, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there for 4 days. And Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? This is an opportunity for Jesus to prove to them who he is. Obviously, the witnesses of this resurrection are never going to be the same. You don't see a dead man walk out of a grave and not have your life changed forever. The people who experience the pain of having their friend die do get to experience the ultimate thrill of watching their friend walk out of a grave. I'm curious if I just ask you this question, it's a pretty simple question, I think you're going to say yes. Do you want to know how powerful God is? Do you want to know how kind and good God is? Do you want to know that God can heal? Do you want to know that God can provide? Most of us say, of course. But what I see in my own life and in a lot of our lives is that I say yes, but I do not live my life like that is my answer. I don't live my life like that's the answer. Because I don't like putting myself in places where I need to find out about those things. I protect myself at all costs from being in a place of desperation, so that I don't really even need God to come through for me. We cannot learn how comforting God is if one of our main objectives in life is to be comfortable. We cannot learn how responsive God is to our prayers if we never pray. We cannot learn how God will provide for us in our time of need if we provide for others in their time of need, if we never do it, if we never give generously, if we're just focused on being secure. We cannot learn to listen to the voice of God to guide us if we have all of our plans mapped out with His help. I've been reading through some of the New Testament with my daughter Cooper recently, and it just feels like every night one of the questions that she asks when she hears about how Jesus healed people, or Paul heals people, or Peter heals people, and she sees God doing miracles in people's lives, and a frequent question is, can God still do that? And I just want to say, yes, Cooper, He can, and He could, and He will, but man, it's almost like we want to see miracles, but we just don't want to need miracles. You know what I mean? We would love to have a miracle in our life, but we just don't want to put ourselves in a place where we need a miracle in our lives. The people that had the most faith in the New Testament, I'm guessing, was a person who was blind, who was given their sight, a person who was crippled, who was been given the ability to walk. And I just think specifically of the guy whose child had died, and Jesus healed that child. Like, how could that person's faith, that person didn't have a shallow faith anymore. But I get concerned sometimes that maybe my faith and our faith isn't so deep because we've just protected ourselves from needing God to provide for us. We want to see miracles. We want to experience these kinds of stories, but we don't want to put ourselves in a place where we actually need God to do that. We're not going to see that God is moving in the hearts of our friends if we are just going to avoid awkwardness at all costs and never bring up spiritual topics of conversation. We're not going to know that God can break us from our addictions if we just lie to people and don't admit that we have a problem. We're not going to experience God's financial provision for us if our main focus is being comfortable and secure. Has the way that God interacts with us changed? And was the way that God was displaying His power unique in the first century? I think the answer to that question is yes. Perhaps. But have we built systems and bought into cultural norms that have essentially eliminated our need for God's power? I think the answer is yes. I think that we do a pretty good job of kind of curbing the ability for God to prove Himself to us. So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you've heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." And when he said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." And the dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." I've tried to imagine being there. I don't know if I would have rubbed my eyes, or if I would have fallen on my face, or if I would have wondered if I had had enough electrolytes that morning. I don't know how I would have responded, but at some point there would have been no denying that God had come through and done something miraculous. And all of these people that witnessed this began to talk about it. There was no going back from this moment for Jesus anymore. He could dodge the "Are you God?" question all he wanted to this point, but the frenzy around Jesus increased exponentially from this point forward. You find, if you read the end of John 11 and you read John chapter 12, that Jesus withdraws himself and goes to a place called Ephraim. And this is all just right before the Passover week in Jerusalem. The Passover is Christmas plus Thanksgiving plus 4th of July all combined. That's how national this holiday is, and it's how celebrated it is. Thousands, maybe millions of people would come to Jerusalem just for this 1 week of celebration every year. And so when Jesus withdraws to Ephraim, everybody in Jerusalem is talking about how Lazarus is alive. And they're also saying to themselves, he's got to make an appearance, right? He's got to come to Jerusalem for the Passover, right? And the Pharisees give the orders. If anybody hears or sees Jesus, they're legally required to report it to them. They've begun their plot to kill him. Jesus, guess how he sneaks back into town? On the night before Palm Sunday, do you know where he goes? You know where he sleeps? Our man Lazarus' house. It says that he sneaks back into Bethany. The Pharisees, by the way, are not only plotting to kill Jesus, but they're plotting to kill Lazarus. They don't want anyone to see Lazarus walking around. That's evidence of the resurrection power of Jesus. And so they plot to kill Jesus, they plot to kill Lazarus, and it's from Bethany that Jesus arrives on the opening day of Passover week to Jerusalem. This is what happened on Palm Sunday. The next day, the great crowd that had come for the festival heard that Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem. They took palm branches and went out to meet him, shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the King of Israel." There's no way around it. Jerusalem is buzzing. Jesus is here. They're waving palm branches. You know why they do that? They do that as a sign of triumph, as a sign of peace. That's what they would do if a king was coming into town. If you skip down to verse 17, look what it says about Lazarus. Now the crowd that was with him when he called Lazarus from the tomb and raised him from the dead continued to spread the word. Many people, because they had heard that he had performed this sign, went out to meet him. That is why the parade was waiting for Jesus, because Lazarus had come back from the dead, and all their parents and their grandparents and their ancestors had been waiting for this moment, and they were the ones that were going to receive the Messiah. So that sets the stage a little bit for this series that we're going to be in. And if you were here about a year ago, we started this, we did a series leading up to Easter. We called it 7. And we talked, I don't know if you remember this, we talked about the 7 things that Jesus said while he was on the cross. It was one of my favorite Easters ever, because I felt like last year, Easter was more than a day. Easter ended up, at least for me, being a season where I was looking forward to Easter for 7 or 8 weeks with you. And I loved that so much that as we were trying to figure out how are we going to get ready, get our hearts ready for Easter this year, we thought, man, what if we take something and just try to draw it out and just stay there for a little bit? What if we don't just make Easter kind of a one-day high and then back down to regular life? What if we build towards it? And so that's what we're going to do. Holy Week is the week that leads up to Easter. It starts on Palm Sunday and goes all the way till Resurrection Sunday, Easter Sunday. And we're just going to take that week and we're just going to spread it out over 5 or 6 weeks. And each of these next 5 or 6 messages here on Sunday morning will be about one of the days leading up to Easter Sunday. And I'm excited about it. I think it's a way for, at least for me, for Easter to just feel like it just means more. And that I'm not rushing through it, but I'm just sitting in it and just reveling in what God has done for me through Jesus. So that's the plan. We also have a kind of a church-wide invitation, if you will. And I'd like to invite my friend Tyler Gorham out here to tell us about it. So would you guys give it up for Tyler Gorham for me?
Hello, hello. Thanks, Joel. Well, I am here on behalf of my beautiful wife, Julie, who is our Director of Discipleship and Women's Ministry. Any Shrek fans in the house this morning? Yeah, thank you. Julie hit me with a little Princess Fiona yesterday. She went to bed a beautiful princess, and at some point in the night, she became a feverish, flu-ridden ogre. And so she was not able to come up here and teach all of you this morning about this 21-day fast that we're going to do. I asked Julie if I could say that, and she was too sick to say no. So I said, we're keeping it, because that's the only transition I have. So I get to introduce this challenge that Julie and our leadership are putting forward for our church, as Joel said, as a way of anticipating and looking forward to Easter, and also on the heels of Ciro Castro's message last week about fasting. So fasting can take a lot of forms, and we'll talk about those, but the heart behind it is to awaken our awareness and our hearts and our dependence on God. We live in an extremely distracted and busy age where busyness is almost like a currency. Like if you ask how we're doing, I have no longer say, oh, we're busy, because that's just like, it used to feel good, to make sure that people knew we were as busy as we're supposed to be. Fasting is a way of awakening our desire to see God throughout the day. It's a way of realizing how dependent we are upon him. And so as a way of anticipating Easter, we're going to enter into this 21-day fast together as a church. So what is that going to look like? There's really not one specific way for you to enter into this. If you are totally new to fasting, don't worry. Julie wanted me to point out, we are not asking you to just move out into the woods and live on water for 3 weeks, which is good news. There's really not a wrong way to do it, I would say. There's 3 main ways that you could fast, or kind of 3 categories. One would be time-limited fasting. So that could look like not eating from sunrise to sunset, or maybe that's skipping breakfast and not eating until noon. There's also a partial fast. So you might hear this with our Catholic or Lutheran friends who participate in Lent, where you give up something. Maybe that's coffee or alcohol, or some part of your daily routine that you would miss, and not just out of a willpower or New Year's resolution type giving something up, but as a way of making yourself think about God throughout the week. What is something that you could give up in order to trigger small moments of prayer or moments of realizing that God is with you at that particular time? There's also a soul fast. And so maybe that's not food related. And honestly, just kind of peeling back the curtain, for some of us, our relationship to food might be challenging enough where it wouldn't be healthy for us to think about restricting food. And so that could be a soul fast where if you are addicted to your phone in any way, shape, or form, this is a fantastic time to put that thing aside, whether that's deleting social media off your phone. My plan, I've just found I can delete whatever apps and I'll just find some other reason. I'll be on like Yahoo News. You didn't even know that site was still active. I'll be like, well, here's something I can do. So I'm planning on just plugging my phone into the wall and treating it like a landline, and I'll be buzzing if I can do that. So whatever that may be, whatever distraction you may have, one of the ways Ciro said is that if we can live on less, we will. So we can have this kind of surface level faith that feels like we have just enough God in our lives, and we don't realize the depth that God would like us to usher into with him. And so by removing some of these distractions or dependencies, we aren't giving these things up as a way to earn God's favor or to do more for him. But in Ciro's words, I think it was something like, instead of doing more for him, it's spending more time with him and deepening that relationship. So you can choose one of these things or a few. It might kind of feel like an experiment. I've tried this over the past few weeks as part of Lent, and some of the things that I gave up have been effective, and some of them were like, you know what, I don't actually miss going into the candy jar. I just like candy, but I haven't prayed more because I stopped eating Tootsie Rolls. So for me, this will mean actually fasting from food at some point. For my wife, she doesn't really miss not eating an entire plate of eggs in the morning, and so it'll look something different for Julie. This is important that it's not a New Year's resolution. So there's kind of 4 key ways that this is different from us just telling you you're not as healthy as you should be, because if you're on the same corners of the internet that I am, I hear plenty of that messaging around me. So I don't need someone else telling me that I should be more active or whatever that may be. So this is not a New Year's resolution. The motivation is different. Your resolutions might be for self-improvement. When we're fasting, we're talking about hungering for God. It's almost not about you in a way. The audience is different. You might post about your New Year's resolution, and maybe that's good for accountability. I'm not anti-resolution. But when Jesus tells his disciples, he says, when you fast, basically hide it. Like, don't tell people how hungry you are. Biblically, it was almost always food, I think, that they're fasting from. Don't broadcast the fact that you're fasting, but instead, go about your daily life in a way that fasting and that time with the Lord it's just relational. It's between you and God, and it's not for, your public platforms. The power source is different. If I have a New Year's resolution, that's a big, just willpower. I'm just going to be gritty. I'm going to grind through it. I'm going to get through it. When we fast, as Ciro taught last week, it's a dependence on the Holy Spirit. I'm making space, almost personally for my weakness, to be exposed and inviting the Holy Spirit to fill that gap. And lastly, the outcome is different. So we're talking about in resolutions, maybe that's a better habit, or maybe that's some healthy, whatever it may be. Our goal in this 21 days of fasting is that anticipation and a deeper dependence and relationship with God, so that the outcomes couldn't be more different. Okay, so we have about 8 days to prepare for this. To give you one more concrete example, I can just drop this here. Thanks, buddy. To give you one more concrete example of what this might look like for you, we have friends in Florida who participated in a 21-day fast with their church, and this couple that we're friends with gave up TV and sugar. It was a longer list. You don't need to worry about it being this long, but TV, sugar, music that's not worship, and podcasts. So a lot of really distracting, small distracting things that add up to, a lot of time throughout their day. And Julie had texted her to ask, what the result of that fast was. And here's what she said. Through fasting, I was able to see how busy my mind was. And when I often felt alone or that the Lord wasn't present, it was due to the fact that I was caught up in all the things of life and didn't make space to talk to him. I was able to move through life slower and have a clearer mind. I was intentional about spending more time in worship, prayer, and good conversation with my husband. Now I know if I feel disconnected from the Lord, odds are that I need to be intentional about what I'm feeding my mind and heart. I need to make space to hunger him. It's crazy how healing a little bit of stillness can be. So that is what we are, kind of challenging and encouraging everyone to take part in. Oh, thank you. And to do this, we're not just sending you out on your own. There is a table with these little notebooks and a card that will give more information in case anything I've said wasn't clear, and also prayer prompts. So for each day, you may wonder, okay, if I'm giving up this stuff, if I'm turning off my TV for 3 weeks, what do I do with my time? The hope is that would lead you to more time in scripture or prayer or just stillness and being silent or slowing down, spending time with the Lord. That could also mean, you have 4 hours on a Saturday that you're not distracted. Maybe that's just some life-giving hobby or activity or spending time with friends, something that is life-giving to you that is honoring to the Lord, that you're kind of connecting with him and connecting with his creation. And to encourage that, we have these notebooks. So if that is prayer for you, You can have these as kind of a way to record your prayers, as a way to remind yourself of those prompts. And each day of those 3 weeks, there's a different prompt. You can scan the QR code to receive a daily text, and there's even a video that will be there, so you can make it as self-guided or as kind of guided what we'll be doing together as a church if you choose to go the route of the notebook card. So you can have as much guidance through this as you'd like. That will start next Monday.
Yeah.
And you can grab one of these on the table. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Can we thank Tyler for doing that this morning? My man. And I don't know, I love the way Tyler just presented that, because this really isn't about adrenaline. It's about abiding. It's not about mustering up the emotion to kind of dive in for 20 minutes. It really is about staying there for 21 consecutive days with the Lord. And nobody's going to give you a trophy. Nobody's going to clap for you. Nobody's going to be impressed by you. That's kind of the point, that it is just about cultivating this personal and deeper connection with Jesus during this very, very special time of the year. And I'll just add one comment to this QR code. One, Julie has done an amazing job of lining this up. And for those of us that do opt into this, I'm excited for us as individual people in our relationships with Jesus. One of the ways that I think it will be very cool to see our whole church do this together is that if you do sign up and text that word or scan that QR code, you just get added to a text list. I think you're going to get a text every morning at like 5:30 or 6. And not only will it remind you of that day's topic or prompt, but it's just going to send you about a 60-second prayer from another brother or sister in our church. People right now are recording these prayers that they're praying over you. And so just, you're signing up to be prayed for and to be a part of a big church family. And I'm really excited about it. I really am. So I hope you jump in. You have a week to think about it, and that's on purpose. We didn't want you to get all excited about it and commit to something that you're not sure if you can follow through on. Give this some thought for a week. And then on March 16th, 8 days from today, we'll all start it together and finish it on Easter Sunday. Thanks for watching. To find out more about our church, about when and where we meet, about joining a group, about serving on a team, about giving online, you can find all of it at threecreekschurch.com.